Moxie Kinetics presents How to Change Tubeless Tires with Emma Marinin.
All right, I'm going to show you how to change tires when you have a tubeless setup. And I'm going to do it on probably the most challenging tire setup that I mess with, and that's the tires on my fat bike. So I was just at Fat Bike World Championships, so I've got some nice little race tires on here. They're pretty skinny, they're 3.8s, they've got a pretty fast rolling profile. They're really great on hard packed groomed fat bike terrain. If it's soft or more natural trail, this tire is a total, it just post holes. But it was good for, well, actually it wasn't good for the World Championship course. I made a major equipment choice error. But normally when you're racing fat bikes on groomed terrain, this is the right tire profile. But now that I'm home, I'm gonna play and have fun on my much fatter, much more aggressive tread tire that floats on the snow. So first thing I'm gonna do to change my tires is just take the air out of the tire. There's not a lot of pressure in here to begin with, so the air just kind of slowly doodles out as opposed to like a mountain bike or a road bike tire. So I just kind of help the air out by pushing it. One thing I find is that most people don't change their tires very often. They generally only do it when they're like need to replace their tires. And it's kind of a shame because having the right tires for the type of terrain you're going to be on makes such a difference. And so learning that it's not really all that hard to do, I think, is really important. Okay, so the air is mostly out. For me, the hardest part is always breaking the bead on this. You can use a tire lever, and I will resort to that sometimes if I can't get it. But I worry about the tape on the inside of the rim. It's easy to kind of nick and damage it when you're yarding on these things. So I try not to. So I'm gonna like take bear claw hands and put them over my tire and put my fingers right by the edge of my rim. I'm gonna take my knees and set them wide and put them right against my rim so I've got something to leverage against. I don't put it on the spokes because the last thing I wanna do is damage the tension of my rim. So nice wide stance there. I'm going to pull, and no luck, so I'm gonna kind of move over a little bit and try another spot, and I'm just trying to find a little weakness. Oh, so close. And, oh, I'm getting closer. A little weakness in that seal. Honestly, I find these race tires, they fit really snugly on these rims. They're like the hardest to pop. There we go. So you do kind of have to yard a little bit, but you'll get there if you keep walking around. So now that I've got that seal popped, I'm just gonna run the whole way around, freeing it on that side. And then now I'm gonna grab a tire lever and pull the tire over the rim on one side. Okay. So now tire's floppy, completely removed from one side of the rim. And then I'm going to save as much of my sealant that's liquid in there. There's actually not a lot in there. I did race. So I've got this little like syringe that I plop in there and I just suck out the sealant that's there on the bottom. Kind of too full because it's a mess to have this stuff go all over the place. But also I'll reuse it if they haven't been on my tires that long. And this is literally, these tires haven't even been on my bike a week. So, putting it in. First I mostly got air, not much sealant. So, excellent, pulling out the sealant and just putting it in my little collector jar. So this is just like a jar I saved from something else. And I've measured out my little sealant markers on it so I know how much. So I just pulled out about 2 ounces of sealant. For fat bike tires, I typically, if they're brand new tires, I put in like 5 to 6 ounces of sealant, which I know is a lot, but the tires are really big. If they've had sealant in them before, like I use orange seal and it will put like this skim coating on the inside of the tire. And so then once that's in there, like if you're changing your tires back and forth, you don't have to use so much. I'll show you that when I put my other tire on here. You'll see what that skim looks like. But anyways, I'll probably put like 3 ounces back in the tire. So one side's off, I'm gonna spin my tire around, and then I'm gonna pull that bead off on the other side, which usually is not as hard as the first side, but sometimes you still gotta give it a pretty hard oomph pull. And then see if I can slide my tire off the edge here. There we go. So, there. Little pull to get that off. Okay, race tire off. A little bit of sealant still in there, not a big deal. Set that down. I'll kind of let it dry on the inside and wipe out any extra, but I like to leave that kind of like skin on the inside, so I'm not very aggressive with it. I'm gonna grab a paper towel and I'm gonna just wipe the edge of the rim. I mostly just wanna make sure that there's no dirt in there or any yucky, like kind of spider webs of sealant in there, just so I've got the best contact point for the new tire bead on this rim. And as I did that, there's kind of a little chunky in there. I definitely got some dirt, probably was actually inside those tires before I put them on. I haven't put race tires on my bike and, oh man, it's been more than a year since those tires have been on a bike, so they've just kind of probably collected a little dust is what I'm seeing. So yeah, ew. But I'll clean now. I don't worry about the sealant that's on that tape because honestly that's less sealant that I have to put back in there. So, that said, I'm going to gently set that guy down. The new tire that I'm putting on, well, not new, but the replaced tire I'm putting back on. So these are much wider. The sealant got nice and stuck to itself on the inside. You can see on the inside here that nice orange skin. That's just like a really thin layer of dried sealant. And again, it just kind of helps fill in all the little air holes. Rubber is porous, so it's nice to have that full or filled in with a little sealant. It's one thing when you use brand new tires, why it always takes more sealant is because part of it's just sucked up into all those little holes. So the next thing that's really important is making sure that you find the directionality of your tire. Usually it's somewhere on the tire, like where all the specs for the tire is. This one it happens not to be, but it says that my direction is that way. So I like to think about the top of my tire going that way. So when I put this on my rim, I'm gonna wanna make sure I'm going that way. Your rotor is going to be on the left side, the non-drivetrain side. So I'm always gonna set these guys up together. One of the little pro tricks is to make sure that wherever your valve is, that you want the logo of your tire to match up with it. Obviously, this does not affect how the tire behaves. It just looks pretty. And you know, your bike is awesome, so you might as well do all the things. So I'm just gonna go around and slide one edge of my rim, or my tire on the rim. And this one's being a little stiff. If they're being really fussy, which this one is right now, I'll grab a tire lever and come from the outside and slide that puppy on. So now I've got my tire on one side of the rim. Come back up to the valve side, and I'm gonna just tuck my tire into that other side of the rim the best I can, leaving a little opening. I'm gonna set this down, and now for the sealant. So I've got my little guy, 2 ounces. I'm gonna put in 3 ounces. So I'm gonna grab some of my Sub-Zero sealant for fat biking. I'm really a believer in the Sub-Zero. Not that I've actually tried the other sealant, but I've never had a problem. And I've raced fat bikes in like -20 degrees, so I'm gonna believe it helps. One of the big things that's different about it is it's got lots more little particles in there that just seals up holes faster. And I think it's also more flexible because your tires are gonna kind of change a little bit how they contact with the rim when you have those extreme temperatures, and metal cools faster than rubber. Anyways, so super shake your sealant up before you pour it in your measuring thing, because there are those little particles in there and you want to make sure that they're completely suspended in the solution. So now I've got that. You can put sealant in your tire two ways. Because I've just taken this off and the valve core, I'm not replacing it on this valve. I'm just gonna pour it in and then finish putting the tire on, but you could also put the tire completely on and then take the valve core out and shoot it down and then put the valve core back in. I do that generally if I'm just topping off sealant, obviously, or if I decide to change this valve core, because they do just kind of get gummed up with stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna hold my tire, grabbing my sealant, and I'm just gonna pour it in, shake it out of my little container, and oh, my tire's coming off a little bit, so I'm just going to kind of tap that in more. Now, this is the one thing that I think is really important, is that I'm gonna slowly rotate my tire so that the valve core is at the bottom and the part of my tire that's not connected is up towards me. Then I'm going to use my fingers and see if I can slide this tire on without using a tire lever. Oh, and I'm going to be successful. Sometimes you still have to use a tire lever. Again, I just try to avoid it because funny things can happen. Okay, the next thing is that you want to try to make sure that the tire is generally close to the edge. With a tire that takes this much volume, if you're using a charger instead of an air compressor, it doesn't always work the first time, so oftentimes it takes a time or two. For the most part, I'm in pretty good shape. If you find a spot where there's like a good gap, you can kind of like pull the tire towards the edge, or you can even take the tire and kind of roll that edge down on the ground. If you're having trouble with the whole thing, by all means, roll the whole tire gently. Okay, so now I'm gonna put air in my tire. I use a charger because I don't find it as scary or as noisy as my air compressor, and I don't worry about exploding my carbon rims. I don't know if that really happens, but I've heard the rumors. So yeah, so my charger, I've already got air in here. It's inflated as much as it'll let me go, which is 150 PSI. If I was successful and got all that air in and didn't lose any trying to seat this, it would probably inflate this tire to like 10 or 15 PSI. Certainly within the specs of my rim and tire scenario. So don't think that this is going to inflate to 150. So putting it on, cross your fingers, and let's put air in there. Oh, I can tell this first time is a total failure. I did not get any seating. So I'm just going to put more air in my charger. Oftentimes it takes a few tries with these really big tires. I almost can get a mountain bike tire. Like, I would like to say I'm 100% on a mountain bike tire, but I'm sure there's been a time or two that hasn't happened. I've never not been able to do it on the first try with a cross or road tire. But again, just because there's so much volume to these, they're not easy, which makes sense. Okay, so let's try again. Oh, I can see some air going in. Oh, so you're listening for those little pops. So that means I've got some seating of my tire on the rim. I'm still losing some air. It's not completely seated, so I'm just going to pump some air in there. And I can tell I'm losing it. Ooh, good pop. Basically as fast as I'm pumping it. But I'm getting the little pops of seating. The tires want to connect with the rim. Okay, so I'm gonna, now that I've got most of that, I'm gonna put a little bolus of air back in, charging it up. Ooh, another really good pop. Okay, so I think I'm in there, so I'm gonna stop equalizing the air, and then I'm gonna take a nice little visual, and I'm just gonna look and make sure that all around I've got a nice connection of my tire to rim, that there's no gapping. I'm gonna look at the other side. It looks pretty darn good everywhere. So I'm gonna call that seated. For like the next half an hour, I'm gonna leave a little bit more air in here than I generally would when I store a bike like this. So I'm gonna pump this up to about 20, 30 PSI. Again, it's well within the range of these tires. I would never ride a fat bike on snow with that much pressure. It would be miserable. But I'm just kind of making sure that I do have some pressure pushing the bead of the tire onto my rim. Okay, so that looks good. And I'm going to disconnect my air. And I'm gonna grab my paper towel and just wipe off the escape sealant on both sides. Okay, and then one of the good tricks that I've learned over the years, I learned this from Roger at Kenda Tire, who's such an amazing guy and has put 4 tires on for me. I want to talk about is he takes the tire and he just gently taps it on all the sides. Just kind of making sure that we've got a good seal on all those corners. And he's going to do that on both sides, you know, just kind of working around the circumference. And then what he does is he kind of plays like a hula hoop game. And we're going to swoop this side to side like this, and all this is doing is it's swishing all that sealant all around on the inside of the tire. I'm going to flip it over, do the same on the other side, splashing the sealant around in there, and then spin it around 180, do the same again, spin it, and now I've got awesome fat tires for my fat bike. So pretty easy. Once you start doing this a fair amount on your own, it becomes really no big deal when you have little hang-ups like you're having a hard time getting air in there. But again, it's really nice to have a good collection of tires. You know, usually for your home terrain, like you kind of know what tires work, but if you're gonna go on vacation, you know, to a place that, say you live, like I live in Bend, where our trails can get pretty dry and powdery in the summer and be very loose over hard. And then I'll go up to Canada and ride in BC at like Whistler for a week, where it's a lot more loomy and wet and rooty and slimy. I definitely am gonna want different tires on to have a different experience. So knowing that it's really easy for me to change my tires myself with this tubeless setup, it's super important. So it's that easy. So I hope you get a few different tires in your quiver and put different tires on with more regularity, except for when you're dead of tread. All right.
Thanks for watching my video. Now go put some awesome tires on your bike.